Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this session on inclusive insurance. We feel insurance is a very effective tool in the bouquet of services among the various financial services available, especially in today's context, for building resilience in responding to issues of climate change, issues of disaster risk reduction, issues of food security, universal health care. We strongly believe that insurance can play a very effective role. And I think with this context, we plan to discuss today a very important topic that has perhaps been a barrier for expansion of insurance services globally. The issue of trust, the issue of creating awareness, issue of ensuring how can the mechanism of insurance be understood by more and more people, people who have never experienced any other financial service, and by people who actually need it the most, given the changing times that we are living in now. To discuss this topic, we have a wonderful panel here with you. My name is Pranav Prasad. I work with the ILO's Impact Insurance Facility, and together with colleagues from Microinsurance Network, Busara, and Acre, I plan to discuss this topic in many aspects of this topic, actually, to ensure that we have opportunities and different channels by which we can reach the customers who would benefit more from insurance. So to kickstart the process, let me first invite Karimi Nathinga, who is the regional coordinator at the Microinsurance Network based out of Nairobi in Kenya. Karimi also drives the best practice group for building the resilience of smallholder farmers. To understand from her the work that the network has been doing in understanding these various aspects through the landscape study that they do, to give us a state of play of what is actually happening on the ground as far as inclusive insurance is concerned. So Karimi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pranav, for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to this discussion. As Pranav has mentioned, the Microinsurance Network, our core focus is really being an advocate for inclusive insurance within the entire ecosystem. One of the flagship projects that we have is called the Landscape of Microinsurance, where we have been tracking the evolution of microinsurance products across Africa, Asia, and the LAC region for the last 5 years. Now, these insights are very critical in understanding how we are designing products, what is in the market, what are the risks being faced, and how then can we better position ourselves as players within the entire ecosystem to make sure that we are serving the vulnerable population in a way that works best for them. Pranav has mentioned a number of key focus areas, and this part of the presentation, I'll basically focus on the data and what we can tell from the data, and then how we can leverage that data to build community strategies that advance inclusive insurance in Africa. One of the trajectory that we've been noting is that there's been a growing traction of microinsurance in Africa. This is, of course, driven by the increasing emerging risks, as Pranav has mentioned, and also just a desire to move more into the underserved segments, as well as a form of social protection. From the data, about 33% of all the products that were reported last year came from Africa. Of all the new products that had been launched in the last 2 decades were from Africa, really signaling that the market is growing in terms of the products that are there. But the disconnect is the low uptake within the region. I think currently the penetration stands at 3%. And that is a really low number, which shows that, I mean, over 90% of the population is still unprotected. So what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the complexities that providers or the supply side are mentioning, that some are mentioning as a hindrance to serving this community effectively? One is really the profile of the population they are serving. These are people who are probably engaging with microinsurance for the very first time, and the new categories of risks that are coming up, that there isn't much knowledge or much previous data on those risks, as well as the income instability within the emerging consumers that they are serving. So this has resulted in the desire to do microinsurance differently compared to traditional insurance. So there has to be flexibility in terms of how you're designing your products, and also how you are engaging the community and the customers that you are serving, just to create that trust, and also just to create that awareness of the benefits and the value proposition of microinsurance. Because within low income populations, one of the key barriers is also the value proposition of microinsurance. They often have competing priorities. They have very limited knowledge of how these products work, and even how to really interact with the product from the uptake phase all the way to the claims settlement phase. So how then do you design your distribution, your uptake, to ensure that you are interacting with them, and you are creating an environment where they are aware of the value of having an inclusive insurance product? And this now calls for the sector to really be flexible in how they design their products, to really engage the consumers also, adopt human-centered design strategies, and just really put the customer at the heart of their design and distribution process. And I believe the rest of the colleagues will really show concrete case studies on how these approaches are working for them. Thank you, Pranav.
Thanks, Karimi, for highlighting these aspects of the need for kind of, let's say, customization for creating awareness of inclusive insurance. And you pointed to the need of kind of a community approach. And we understand the word of mouth is an important way of doing it. There is also this channel of kind of getting to hear from someone you know, rather than just a mass scale advertising push on it. So I think at this point, it's pertinent to get in and understand what Acre is doing. And we are very happy to have Jean Ese with us here. She's been driving the communication aspect and looking at inclusive insurance modalities with Acre Africa, which is a specialized organization acting as an intermediary for many of these issues. So, Jean, hearing what Karimi said about having somebody who you can trust and who can communicate effectively with you when you're looking to cover your risks, what are the work that Acre been doing? What are the aspects that are being considered in your perspective to ensure that the mechanisms are effectively communicated? Over to you, Jean.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, I agree with my colleague Karimi that when it comes to distribution of microinsurance, then a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity has to play. Initially, when Acre Africa started distributing agriculture insurance, they leveraged working with aggregators and cooperatives to reach farmers. But in 2017, we realized that farmers are not gaining trust in the products that we were distributing. And therefore, there was need to look for a more high-touch model that farmers can trust in, that can also give traction to awareness, because as Karimi has indicated, that one of the challenges is low awareness and low literacy levels among smallholders on matters insurance, and not just agriculture insurance alone, or even on the other micro insurance components like health cover and property coverage for smallholder farmers. They do not have the awareness of the products in the market and how to go about them. So this necessitated us to come up with the Village Champion model. This is a high-touch last-mile model where we have peer-to-peer knowledge transfer. Eka Africa trains champions. These are agents based in villages and local communities. We select people who have influence in the community, who have knowledge of how the community operates, and have the ability to mobilize fellow farmers for trainings and for uptake of insurance. And one of the things that this model has done is that we have found that it is very effective in improving the awareness of smallholder farmers on the matters of insurance, because the Village Champion go basic to even use of local languages in translating and explaining what agriculture insurance is and what the products are all about. And also they leverage local structures like existing social meetings like church gatherings, village savings groups to ensure that they reach farmers. And also because they are locally available, farmers have found trust in even coming back to them with questions, with explanation whenever they are not understanding the sort of the claims process or the payout process, because you find that farmers will start having complaints of I've been paying insurance, because from their understanding they thought uptake of insurance is an investment, and as any investment works is that at the end of it there is gain. But when you explain insurance and you're like, there are times you will not have suffered loss and therefore you will not have any availability of a payout, then farmers were not getting this. But the presence of village champions in the communities has improved this. Another thing that this has enabled us to gain is accessibility to smallholder farmers, because if we look at training and capacity building among smallholder farmers through physical meetings and physical trainings every season, then it becomes very resource intensive. And therefore, through our village champions, the farmers are able to access them during their local meetings. And as I said, these champions leverage local structures like chief meetings, church seminars to train other farmers. And therefore, farmers have really gained awareness. We've seen traction in education and awareness, and also traction in uptake, whereby farmers are changing their perceptions around agriculture insurance and how it works. Yeah.
Thanks, Jean. Before I kind of move on and discuss how it's reflected in research, just a quick question. What's a typical profile of a village champion? Is he or she necessarily a leader in that sense, or are they these church ministers? I mean, what's a typical profile?
Okay, so a typical profile of a village champion is a person who has the ability to mobilize, has the skills of training, and along the process we have not really found the ideal and perfect picture that we were looking for in village champions. So this has called for a lot of capacity building and training. And through the model, we also found that there are a lot of young people who are now involved in agriculture, and also as statistics shows that also majority of the people who are involved in agriculture are women. And therefore, if we went for the people who are leaders in communities, it would then keep off women and youth, because in most cases, most of the rural villages are headed by men. And therefore, in the selection of village champion, we ensure gender inclusivity by showing a representation of both genders and even an involvement of youth, because along the years, we've incorporated also digital inclusion, and you find that youth are very quick when it comes to technology, and also uptake and interest of the youth in the project when digital inclusion is introduced has also gone very, very high. So yes, we look at people who have influence in the society, people who can mobilize, people who have communication skills, and who command a bit of respect. But again, we ensure to have gender inclusivity when recruiting and training these village champions.
Okay, thanks for this. So let me just kind of pick on these 2 points of kind of personalized services that Karimi has mentioned and how they are being delivered through the champions, and check with Jacqueline on how has this been reflected in research? Has research shown some positive angles or not? So Jacqueline, you work with Busara, which has been working in this field for a long time. You yourself have been very active in the field through your various engagements. So what's your perspective on this? Is personalization the need of the hour? Is mass communication to a defined audience the need of the hour? How is it playing out in the field, and what are the feedback that you are getting?
Yeah, thank you, Pranav, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all here today. So yeah, I think one thing that's very important in behavior science is actually context. For us, we say context really matters. So if you're designing an insurance product, for example, then context really matters. I think one thing that inclusive insurance is trying to achieve is actually doing a human-centered design to design insurance products, and that's something that's very important also in behavior science, meeting people where they are, understanding their challenges, and co-creating and co-designing with them, so that you're actually designing products or services that are personalized and tailored to them. And I think maybe one thing I can mention, since you mentioned about communication. So I think what has come up from Chin and Karimi is awareness creation and education. And I think one thing that we've been trying to unpack is, of course, we know the low uptake of insurance and the high protection, large protection cap, especially in Africa. And one thing that we've been trying to understand is what's really driving this and where the cap is. So when we talk about education, there are many elements related to that, right? There is the message that you're delivering, there is the messenger delivering the message, and there's also the channel. So at Busara, we recently did a study where we wanted to examine the different education methods and formats, specifically for agriculture insurance. So we wanted to see for rural populations, so we studied populations in Uasin Gishu and Kilifi. And actually, it's good that Africa is here because we used most of their education materials. So that's some videos and then also some brochures. So what we wanted to see is which formats do farmers actually resonate with most, and most importantly, which format will enable them to understand some of the concepts of insurance later. So what we did is we had 3 interventions. So one is a brochure, and then 2 is agent storytelling. So an agent explaining what insurance is, and then showing videos of Ec Africa with farmers where they were explaining how weather index works. They paid a premium and they quote a claim. And then we also designed a small gamification, a treasure pot where they could put in candy and simulate risk, see how risk plays out in their normal lives, and then also randomly select maybe the weather was bad, and then they could get a payout from the treasure pot. So we wanted to see if they could understand, especially the concept of risk pooling, which is very important in insurance. And then after a week, we were following up with them, those who received the intervention, not a control group per se, which we just gave them information about agriculture in general, to see if they would actually still remember some of the concepts of insurance. And it was actually very interesting to see the results. So one is, of course, most of them at the baseline. We first of all had a baseline trying to see if they know what insurance is, and then also how they rate themselves. Will they be able to explain insurance to someone, a family member? Or how much do they trust insurance companies? And of course, one thing that came up, which I think it always comes up in insurance conversations, is the lack of trust in insurance companies, especially it could be from negative experiences from the participant, or even hearing stories from their neighbors and friends as well. And then the fact that actually most of the people we engaged had only heard of the National Health Insurance Fund, or the SHA. That's the National Health Insurance in Kenya, and maybe car insurance, but not other types of insurance. And most of them still did not believe in insurance. So we were measuring that knowledge at baseline, and then also at endline after administering the intervention, to see what has changed. And what was interesting actually is storytelling and gamification had huge effect in knowledge, and also the action to the willingness to engage with insurance. So at the end of the day, were the action ready? If we ask them, would you be willing to purchase insurance in the next 6 months? They will say yes, especially if they received storytelling and gamification as an intervention. And the brochure did not have any effect. So it was almost similar as the control group. So for us, I think one key takeaway here is interactive education formats that are also human-centered, work-based, actually. And I think one of the recommendations we make in this report is we can still pair gamification or agent storytelling and sharing videos, etc., with brochures as well. Those can be like take home, so they can take home the brochures later. But one interesting thing also is those who experienced the brochure, those who read the brochure, they were actually more likely, when we rated them later, they said they can explain the product better to their family or friends. But I think also this speaks to the fact that you have a physical document that you can still go back and refer to later. So I think that's why they say they can still explain, because maybe they thought they will still go with this home and they can still explain to other people. And then also, when we were measuring at baseline, of course, mostly it was about the perception of insurance, and then if they understood some of the insurance concepts. And then in the end, also, again, we were trying to see if that has changed, if they now understood some of these concepts as well, and their perception of insurance has changed. So most of them actually were very confident at the beginning that they understood insurance. But then when we measured later on their knowledge, if they understood some of the concepts, what's premium, etc., it did not reflect the high confidence that they had at the beginning. And I think just to emphasize what Chin was speaking about, community champions and peer testimonials and building credibility. When we showed the videos from ECA Africa and we had the agent actually explaining what insurance is, it completely changed, like it had more effect in changing the perception of insurance for the participants that actually experienced that intervention. So for them, they felt like, okay, they now understand insurance. Insurance is for someone like them. So that speaks to the social proof part when we come to behavior science, because they could actually see and hear a farmer talking about insurance. And this is a farmer who is like them. They are experiencing agriculture the same way, the same seasons they are experiencing as well. So it actually shifted their perception of insurance. So I think here this means that leveraging village champions or people that the community already trust, including savings groups, which we are also actually working very closely with in a different project that we are doing, and opinion leaders. But I think Chin mentioned that it's been hard to also profile village champions and know who farmers can actually trust, and also someone that can deliver the message is a powerful tool, I think, and a powerful lever to actually overcome the deep-rooted skepticism in insurance and build more trust in insurance. So yeah.
So these are good understanding, and especially these high touch mechanisms that Jean mentioned, they're having very positive results. But this takes me back to you, Karimi. You mentioned in the beginning that there is a need for customization, there is a need for kind of better explaining the nuances of insurance to the people. So we've heard these examples of village champions, we've heard this storytelling as a tool, and a very important aspect that Jean mentioned of about gender being ensured, gender representation being ensured. So how do some of these aspects find reflection in the landscape or in the work that Microinsurance Network does? Do you think such storytelling, such village champion approach can be that bridge that you are talking about between personalization and mass communication in that sense? What is your view on that?
Yes, I definitely agree with Jean and Jacqueline and the insights that you've shared in terms of how interactive, interaction between the agents and the customer is able to really give a good experience to the policyholder. And this is actually reflected in the results that from the data that we collect. And I'll speak about it from two perspectives. One is in terms of like distribution and coverage. Which are the channels that are covering more people? By that I mean, which are the channels that are able to actually sell insurance or sell insurance and reach the underserved more effectively. From the landscape, the trajectory is more or less similar across Africa, Asia, and the LAC region, in the sense that agents and brokers, financial institutions, and also microfinance institutions have the largest coverage when it comes to reaching to the vulnerable population and selling insurance to them. But this, of course, especially in Africa, we are a credit and life-driven market. So it's also could be that a lot of these agents and brokers are tied to the financial institutions that they work with. And it's not just even financial, it's not just financial credit, but I think some of the work is also in giving them inputs and a form of non-financial credit as well that is linked to the insurance cover that they have. So really speaking to what Jackie was saying about the interaction between the officer or the agent and the consumer. And this interaction is critical because then what it does is that it's able to really explain to the policyholder what are the benefits, and they are sort of close within the community, so the trust aspect is there. So really saying that leverage people for the experiences to create a good customer experience that will ensure there's retention for that particular consumer. But then there's also an interesting dynamic in terms of technology and the role it's playing in ensuring that either the consumers or the policyholders really have a great experience interacting with the insurance itself, the contract itself. So leveraging technology, how do you make a claim settlement really quickly? In Africa, we're seeing a huge rise in mobile money penetration, and also how mobile money is being used to either pay for premiums or even settle claims within a couple of hours, compared to a couple of years back where claim settlement will take a number of days. In addition to that, I think also with technology, the role it's playing, especially for the providers, is also reducing sort of like the administrative costs and the level of effort that perhaps goes into assessing the incidences. I'm sure ACA Africa can talk about like picture-based insurance. There's also parametric insurance in the satellites. All that really reducing the level of effort that goes into acquiring this particular consumer. So from the data, what we are seeing is just how insurance companies are leveraging technology to improve the process and the efficiency, and how they're also leveraging people to make sure that that bridge is that gap is closed, and also to build trust within the communities. I think an important aspect to bring in, as you had mentioned, Pranav, is also in the issue of really making sure that you are customizing the distribution channel to fit a specific segment. So from the data, one of the things that we're seeing, especially within the agriculture landscape, the agriculture insurance data, is the gender differences when it comes to reaching or selling agriculture microinsurance. From the data, one of the things that we are seeing is that a lot of women are being served through the financial institutions, so MFIs, or the financial institutions, compared to other channels like cooperatives that perhaps may not be very, they are more, they speak more to the men within the community, because then they own resources, and especially if they are non-deposit taking and maybe they are doing mechanizations and things like that. Then there's also that aspect. How then do you ensure that, as Jean mentioned about gender inclusivity, that you're factoring that into how you're distributing your product, even in how you're leveraging village champions? I think she's talked about most of the village champions being women, and generally women being social and really being a sign of trust within the community. Then that is driving the uptick and also driving to build the trust that people have and the confidence that people have in inclusive insurance products. So really to say that there's the aspect of leveraging people and experiences in that interactive kind of engagement to build trust and awareness. But then also there's an aspect of technology that is really at play here in terms of ensuring that the ease with which people can buy insurance, the ease with which people can access their claims and have their claims settled is actually made better compared to conventional and traditional insurance back in the day.
Thanks. I think let's take up this issue of digitization and use of technology, which I think is important both for trust building as well as communication with people. So, Jean, in your work that you do with village champions and with communities at large, how is technology being used? Do you use some specific tools to train these village champions, as well as ensure that they are able to reach to the communities, let's say in time? How do they track which church is having a meeting there? So any of those tools, any way in which technology has helped on the ground?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pranav. For sure, like in most of the countries that we operate in, for instance, in Kenya, we have 2 planting seasons, and the insurance window is marked by a certain period. It gets to when the crops are probably flowering, you cannot sell insurance at that point. So we need to time the farmers at pre-season and at the very onset of the season. And therefore, leveraging physical meetings would not really work well for us. And therefore, we brought in digital inclusion, whereby for trainings, because again, as I said, insurance is a complex matter to understand. And therefore, a one-off training in a season would not convert to sales. So we leverage digital platforms for training, whereby we have a learning management system where our champions are profiled and they learn continuously all through the year. And they can also onboard their farmers to the platform. And those farmers that have smartphones or farmers can also dial USSD codes to unlock the learning. Initially, we started by those farmers who have access to smartphones could go through the mobile application and access the learning. But then we realized majority of the farmers have small feature phones, and therefore we were missing out on training these farmers. And that called for the need for us to include learning through the use of USSD codes, where a farmer dials, selects a topic they want to learn about, and continuously learns all through the year. Apart from learning, the digital component has also played a key part when it comes to affordability. As Karemi mentioned, insurance can get expensive, and therefore initially, when we were working with physical assessments to assess losses, it could really get the premium costs high. So to lower this, we have adopted the use of satellite data to measure rainfall ranges and soil moisture content to be able to price products and even reduce the cost of the premium to address affordability. Also, another thing that technology has enabled us to tick off is accessibility and payment of premium. Because if you look at Africa and even Kenya, for instance, the use of mobile money platform has really gone on the rise, and everyone, even the smallholders, are able to use mobile money platforms for payments, for purchase, and therefore we incorporate this in our purchase of premium, where farmers dial USSD codes again to select the crop they are planting, the size of their farms, and get a price for the premium that they're supposed to take for that season. And also we have incorporated technology in that as a farmer dials the USSD code, we are able to get the geomaps coordinates of the farmer, and this helps in verifying the losses. So yes, technology has played a very big role in this, and also access to finance is also another challenge that smallholder farmers are having. At ECA Africa, we have come up with a credit scoring tool that we are working with financial institutions to help them credit score the smallholder farmers, because now smallholder farmers are able to use our learning management system to even do record keeping. And from the records they keep, you're able to tell how much produce did this farmer make this season, how much went to the market, how much was used for local consumption at household level, and also looking at their mobile money records, you're able to credit score these farmers for access to credit from financial institutions and micro financial institutions. So technology has been very useful in that sense. Another way we have incorporated technology to improve trust is through the picture-based insurance application. This is because we have components of basis risks in insurance, whereby the satellite data is not correlating to the on-ground realities of what really happened. And therefore, we came up with a mobile application which enables farmers to periodically take pictures of their fields from germination all the way to harvest, and we correlate the data from the pictures. They take these pictures and use the app to send them remotely to us. We have agronomists who analyze these pictures, and we have also incorporated the use of AI and machine learning to improve verification of loss. And therefore, we are able to correlate the data from the pictures and the data from the satellite to give a ground truthing analysis of loss verification. And farmers have shown more trust through the use of picture-based, because they feel they are part of the process, number one, and again, they feel like they can trust the pictures they submitted, unlike you talking to them about satellite data, something that is very complex and something that they cannot understand. So that, yeah, that's how technology has played a big role in ensuring affordability, accessibility, and learning and awareness at smallholder level.
So this is interesting to hear, and I think this also reflects on what Jacqueline has been talking about, human-centered and engagement directly with the farmers and using the customer. Before I move on to Jacqueline, I think there's a lot of work that kind of happens on the ground, but you are not an insurer. And Karimi's been talking about insurance companies playing and using it. So how does it work? How do the insurance companies ensure that you and the farmers are, everybody is on the singing from the same hymn sheet? So what's the connect? How does the insurance company assist you or work with you in any of these processes? If you can give a quick response before I check with Jacqueline on a couple of things.
So we are not an insurer. Yes, we are an intermediary that links insurance, financial institutions to providing services for farmers. So we work with insurers. They come in to underwrite the products, and we provide platforms for monitoring the seasons. We do all the data analytics, but there is a lot of transparency and shared dashboards where insurers can also verify. When I talk of the picture-based insurance model, we have agronomists from the insurance company themselves assessing the pictures, and also agronomists from our side, and the incorporation of AI as well. This is just to ensure that everybody is on the same platform, there's transparency, and nobody feels like data was skewed to suit certain parameters in any moment.
You need to work closely with both the supply side as well as the demand side to ensure
Very
that
true.
the total understanding is there. Which
Very
brings
true.
me to a very interesting aspect. And Jacqueline, this entire issue of digitization and its importance leads to the issue of how to make it simple, because it's fine, digitization is there, but it also needs to be understood by the people on the ground, what is being there. So especially complex products like parametric insurance that have been talked of, how do you kind of, in your studies, was there any reflection on what kind of products lead themselves to digitization and what kind of products we still need very high touch mechanisms to explain, or this entire issue of simplification with technology? So moving forward, but moving forward, keeping ground realities in view. Any thoughts on that? Any reflections that came out in the study?
Yeah, Pranav. And I think to answer that, I'll have to mention another component of the study that we were doing. So, of course, we know most financial services are moving digital. So what I wanted to know is, for insurance specifically, how easy is it for people to actually sign up for a product online? And then I think I'll respond to Jane's question about training and putting trainings online. So what we did was use an eye tracking machine. This is a behavioral tool. So you just put it in front of the computer, and then as you're navigating your computer, and then it tracks where your eye is actually looking at, so the case points, and then it produces like a heat map showing where you moved to, where you stayed long. So what we were able to see from this data, and then now of course it generates data and insights. So from this, and then we followed it up with in-depth interviews. But from this data, we were able to see where were participants actually lingering more. And the exercise was navigating an insurance company's website, select an insurance product of your choice, and then at the end of it, submit a quotation to the insurer. And what was interesting was after the eye tracking exercise and then the in-depth interviews, we were able to see what participants were struggling with. And most of them actually mentioned the overwhelming jargon that we use in defining insurance terms, etc. Especially when it comes to a policy document, right? I know a policy document has to hold in court, which is why we write it the way we write, with a lot of legal terms. But that's one thing that participants actually mentioned, like it was hard to read. I couldn't understand some of the words. And then the text itself was so dense, it was too much information to actually process. And as humans, we do not have that capacity to actually process a lot of information. Our cognitive bandwidth is small. So that's one thing that we realized. So how do you then make the information that you are sharing very simple and in a language that people can also understand? And I think one thing that actually they mentioned was maybe if the language was also in Swahili, because it's not like most of them were very literate. Some of them, we needed them to at least be at a certain level of literacy, but still some of them mentioned maybe if the document was also in Swahili, in a language that they understand. And then maybe if they also used some icons to show. So you realize that for the insurance companies, where some of the products had, like if it was a fire insurance, and then it had like an icon of fire insurance, and then for them, they would prefer that brand, right? And then also in terms of how easy was it to access the information, how easy was it to actually tell what the product was covering, and then also in terms of the benefits, right, and the extent as well. but there were any more other nuances on this that drove participants to choose a certain brand. I will not mention the insurance platforms that we used, but yeah. So trust, really, what we see here is trust hinges on how simple and easy is it to actually digest that information and what language resonates again with people. So I think here from a behavior perspective as well, you need to segment the people that you're targeting, right? So that you're also presenting information in a way that relates to everyone, or rather the population that you are targeting, and not information that can only be understood by a certain segment of people. And then I think when it comes to what you've mentioned as index insurance, and I think when Chin was mentioning about triggers, etc., one thing, of course, is avoiding using those terms. So how can you use terms that actually are relatable to farmers, for example? So instead of saying if the rainfall meets this threshold, etc., rainfall deviation, 30 millimeters threshold, you could use simple language like if the rainfall is little and your seeds do not germinate, etc. And you can actually show that, right, with pictures. And we know that it's easy for us to actually process pictures than information. So if you can read a picture, it's the same as road signs on the road, right? So if the stop sign was, okay, not stop sign, but because if that stop and it's in red, but if the other road signs were actually words written, we could always miss them. But since they're in signs form, we easily see and digest that quickly. So how can you also use that to make information easy for people to process? And then translating, of course, the indices into everyday language, that's one of them. And then two is now layering information, because what we saw from this study is participants were like, that information was too much for me to actually process. So how can you provide that information in maybe step-by-step flow? So it could be the first page, you are actually outlining clearly what's covered, how payouts are triggered, before going into detail, and again in a language that is that's simple. And then putting the information away that's engaging. I think I've already mentioned that. So if you can use icons or any graphics that people can actually easily understand, that would be one way of simplifying.
Great. So you brought up 3 or 4 very important things that you're talking about: simplification, vernacular use in the local language, and of course visualization, so that you can kind of easily grasp. So whether it's color coding or whether it's signages that can be used, so that this is great. So I think we've covered a fair amount of ground in terms of understanding this entire issue of creating awareness and how to build trust, and how are the high-touch mechanisms being combined with technological tools to ensure that not only does it remain cost-effective, but the quality of information that is transmitted is good enough for the prospective beneficiaries to understand and benefit from the entire effort. I think on this note, the only thing that remains for me is to thank the 3 of you for your inputs and for your explanations and effective sharing of your work. I'm sure these are all learnings that will be useful for the industry as a whole and for various stakeholders to improve their own insurance offerings. And we'll be happy to respond to questions, queries, clarification that the audience may have, and look forward to opportunities to interact more in the times ahead. Thank you very much again to the organizers, and we look forward to future interactions. Goodbye.